Okay, and welcome to Perceptual. I haven't posted for a while, and I thought let's have a chat. So what I'd like to do is really just talk about a couple of things. So I think I'm going to take a journey, and let's expand this a little bit. Let's do better than that. Let's move this across. Happy with that. Okay, so I was thinking I haven't posted for a while, and so I thought I'll just go. Maybe it's useful to actually think about process, and you can come and present things, but sometimes it's just nice to see things in flight. You watch the greats of Jordan Peterson or the Sam Harrises where they're trying to work things out, and I think that's the most exciting piece. So I think I've got here is a lot of them say, well, begin with the end in mind. What is it that I want? What is it that I want to deliver? What is it that I want? What is the promise? What do I actually want to deliver in terms of what I want you to see? And I think here is that I want you to have value. And then the next question will be, what type of value? And I was thinking that one of the big things here is, there's a number of things. I think there's the idea of perfectionism, and there's a whole thing to talk about around perfectionism. But I think what's important is the standards are so impossibly high, and sometimes it's just actually nice to lower the bar to get started. And that's exactly what I've done here, and what is it that I can actually get started? Atomic habits, all those, small habits is really just lowering the bar and breaking it down. So let's just lower the bar. Okay, and let's make a start. And that's what I'm doing here. The second thing is, we talked about, what start with the end in mind, and people talk about, thumbnails even, what's the thumbnail? And I think when you talk about value, what is the value? Why would you spend time sitting here and watching this in process? And I think there's a value in process versus outcomes. And some of this perfectionism thinking is, in terms of all or nothing, is also the idea of process. So, that you can focus on what it is to actually do something. And I think this is the key. People say it's the journey, but I think there's an emergent property when you watch and engage and think about things of what you're doing on this journey, right? So I think, starting with the end in mind, we talked about the idea of perfectionism. And what is it that I want to do? I think, processes versus outcomes. And it's very easy to say, we should be, objective key results oriented and around focused on outcomes, which I think it's fair. And you've got to know where you're going, right? So, that path, you need to know, where you're going to end up. But in terms of delivering value, I think from here to here, which is the promise, I think then it needs to be focused on process. And so what I'm showing you is thinking in process. So I think it was Richard Feynman or someone says, they don't know what they think, and they need to do it on paper. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. And I think I want to bring back the love and the beauty of actually doing, of thinking. And a lot of that is actually the process of thinking. I've been looking at Zettelkastens where what you're doing is you're creating like a slip box and putting items in it, and it's got a set of existing categories that things sort of slip in, and there's another mechanism that things will slip in, but you're also connecting ideas to various things, and it's this multitude of ideas of connecting together that really have a wonderful feel. And then the idea is that you can take a lot of these things and thinking then becomes, or writing even becomes an assembly task, right? And I love the idea of that. I think the guys at what's it called, Rite of Passage, that writing equals assembly. And if you've got all your ideas pre-assembled, then the process of working through them makes it much easier. So again, what's the value? End in mind. Process versus outcomes. I think a lot of people get stuck on outcomes, and it makes it very hard to get started if you want to meander along on this journey, and sometimes you do go backwards. And it took me a long time to realize that. But I think these peak experiences and peak parts of the journey of the end in mind is, for me, and maybe what's worth talking about is I came across and I had to write about it, about 7 sort of key habits or key beliefs that I wanted to believe in. And what I did is I used ChatGPT, to put in my spiel, which I think is good. But I think what it does then is it can not only transform, but I think what it's really good at, the emergent property, is that you can sort of flywheel on this and then create something new comes out. And I think this beautiful process with ChatGPT is you put something into the system in this flywheel effect, and then you come out with this new idea. And what I was desperate to do was to get to my core values. And the idea here was referred to as, I wanted to be indestructible and indestructible, even distractible. But there has to be a core, like the what do they call those Russian dolls? Oh my god. Oh my god, that's really bad. And the idea at the core for me was the idea of there was growth, but there's also self-discovery and also the idea of growth at the core. And people have said, if you're not growing, you're dying. Tony Robbins said that. But this idea of self-discovery as a thing, which brings me to the point of process versus outcomes and destinations. You don't just rock up and discover yourself, or maybe you do. But the idea, and I was really struggling with, why is that a valid purpose? Why? And I think what I realized was the idea that I think it was, it's really just with the assumption that people, I thought, somebody said, I can't remember who it was that don't ask what the world needs, ask what really lights you up. And then if you go and pursue that, that's a good thing, because that's actually what the world needs, is people that are lit up about what they really care about. And this idea of self-discovery, growth as a thing, as a process versus an outcome, I think is key. And what value does that deliver? I think permission, rather than, in terms of perfectionism, a place to be, all or nothing thinking, and external, I think it becomes this internal drive, right? Internal versus external whether you call it locus of controls or motivations or whatever that is. But I think the key thing here in terms of delivering value is that this drive for internal versus external. There's a lot in the world that actually says that you have to be great, that it's all external, you get rewards, you know, all these values. I think it was Alan Watts, right? I loved Alan Watts' quote, and that he talks about when we create humans, when they come out, is that we tell them that rather than, you know, here's a set of rules or things or processes that will actually, you know, allow you to do your journey, we treat them as like probationary humans. And it's like, welcome to the human race, but you're actually on probation. And as you go through all of this journey of life, you have to earn it. And, you know, we ship them off to schools and kindergartens and saying, you know, and quote unquote, grates on me, goes, here, kitty, kitty, here, kitty, kitty, kitty. And we set them on this path of conditional self-worth. And I think the core thing here is that what you find out, if you do well in life, it's not the car, it's not the house, it's not the relationship. You get all of these things, and there is association. Everyone's talked about this, you know, the hedonic treadmill of dopamine. But as a probationary human, you know, A, B, C's and D's at school as you work through. And then when you get to a particular point, it becomes, you realise that it was a trick, you know, that these terms and conditions on a worthwhile human being, which brings us back to perfectionism. Now, I'm sure some people are more prone to this than others. I've certainly battled with it and hooked up this idea of external validation with my self-worth, and when I was doing really well, my self-worth increased. If I struggled and failed and didn't do well, then my self-worth would plummet. So I think that was definitely one of, winning and losing, but my self-worth was just so up and down. And I think, why do all of this? I think for me, then it's going to be for the kids, right? When you do things and you're sending them and they're watching, and as a parent, you know, what are these kids looking at? And I think if they're watching this world where, I'm not sure they're going to see that, but their parents are happy and sad depending on what's going on in their life. They're chasing these outcomes, not realizing that it's a process. There's not a lot of internal self-discovery going on, because there's like this sort of rules that are running underneath, and we're conditioned for these conditional self-worth and arrive to this retirement date or whatever it is before we can then feel happier about ourselves. And then, interesting, you know, the 5 regrets of the dying, you know, include, you know, I wish I had allowed myself to be happier. I wish that I'd kept in contact with friends. I wish that I'd gone for the things that I really wanted to, rather than, you know, what others thought, you know. So I think this probationary humanhood from Alan Watts is quite clever. I think internal and external validation and perfectionism is the assumption that you're earning your worth, and people will like you more the better you do, and then as a result your performance then is driven on your self-worth. And meanwhile we're breeding these kids and telling them that the nature of how the world goes round is based on worth, and it's bullshit. So I think, what's the value? I think thinking through things And just thinking about this now, why self-discovery is important. Gary Vee talks about self-discovery and self-awareness as a driver, and I think as a core value, I think for me it's important as I head off on this journey and want to give something back. This pathway is definitely about a process. I'll keep an eye on the outcomes of where I'm going, just like this video. But it is the journey as you go through and you realize and think about these things, that, you know, what is driving you? Is it these unconscious drives that have been strapped into you and being trained to earn your humanhood? We should be telling these kids that they're already humans first and foremost, and their worth doesn't change whether they're doing well or they're not doing well, and to give them an internal basis and to know themselves. So if the shit hits the fan in the world, that these drives, and Jordan Peterson and others talk about it, if we're so easily swayed on a lot of the bullshit, then it's a very slippery slope to where we end up. And I think that has real life ramifications. If you don't know what you're about and who you are, then you're going to be driven from external standards. And I think it's evidence that it's so easily done already. And sometimes you need to unwind some of these things. So that's what I thought I'd share with you. In motion. I hope you like it. Give me your thoughts. Chris out.